this video I want to talk to you about writing a book review. I want to pass on to you the wisdom that I received decades ago from my PhD supervisor about how to write a book review. The book review has 3 things that it must do, and that really gives you 3 sections to the book review. Anyway, those are the 3 things, 3 parts to the book review. There's the context, there's the content, and there's the evaluation. What do I mean by context? Well, writing a book takes a lot of effort. So the question you have to ask yourself first is, why did this person write the book? Why did they bother? What problem were they trying to solve? What message were they trying to get across? Where were they coming from? Why on earth would they spend their time writing a book? The second part of the review is the content. What do they say? What is their answer to the problem that they were trying to solve? What's the message they've developed through writing the book? What is it that they want to say? And the third thing is the evaluation. You, as the person who's reading the book, has to offer your evaluation as to what the message was, whether you agree with it, whether you disagree with it, whether it's well communicated, whether it's poorly communicated. You add to the book review your own special insights that you bring to reading the book. And the fourth thing, which is not a separate section of the book review, but which is equally important, is not to confuse Section 2 and Section 3. The content must be your description of what the author says. It mustn't be mixed up with your evaluation. You mustn't be confusing what you say and what they say. You need to be very clear who is saying what. The evaluation and the content, so that it's very clear what you're saying, what you're adding, and what the author has said. What I'm going to do in this video is to take a book and present a book review in those 3 sections as I would if I were writing a review of the book, showing you what each of those sections means. And the book I've chosen to review is a book called How We Think by John Dewey. It's a fairly small book, it's a fairly slim book. It was published around 1910, so it's over 110 years old now. And it's called How We Think, and it sets out Dewey's explanation of what is involved in critical thinking. So let's start with the context. Why did Dewey set about writing this book? What is it about him that made him need to write this particular book? Well, as a young man, John Dewey had been greatly influenced by the philosopher Hegel. And Hegel put forward the idea that human knowledge grew through a process that he described as the dialectic. Schematically, it looks something like this. Starting with the thesis, something that is understood to be true, we confront it with its antithesis, a contradiction between 2 things that we hold to be true, and we produce a synthesis. That synthesis is then ready to move into the next round as the thesis, which produces its own antithesis, and so it goes on. It's a more or less mechanical process, a mechanical process of growth of human knowledge. And I think that by the time Dewey came to write How We Think, he'd become dissatisfied with that. That doesn't involve a personal engagement. And what Dewey is describing in How We Think is a personal engagement with how a person could think, but could also think better. What is it that makes good thinking? What is it that makes better understanding? And I think that it's clear from what Dewey says about How We Think that it involves effort. It takes effort to be a critical thinker. It takes discipline. It takes organisation. And what Dewey does in his book is he sets out 5 stages in the process of good thinking. The first stage is confusion. Something unsettles you, you feel that something is wrong, you've got a theory and it doesn't seem to be working, you've got some uneasy something in the pit of your stomach that tells you things aren't going quite right. It's not yet a clear idea, but it's an intuition that something is not quite right about what you've got in your head. The second stage then is to clarify what is wrong with what produces that feeling of uneasiness in you. What is it that is creating the problem? What is it that is a problem for you that you need to be thinking about? And then once you're clear what the problem is that you're thinking about, you're ready to start proposing possible solutions. Now, it's crucially important that what Dewey says is the difference between good thinking and bad thinking happens at this stage. You start thinking what would resolve your difficulties, and as soon as you've got one solution, many people will rush to put it into practice. In fact, many people will come into the beginning of the cycle with a solution that they're trying to apply to any problem that they come across. And that's not good thinking either. What Dewey says is that the crucial element of critical thinking is postponing judgment at this point. Brainstorm as many possible solutions as you can. And that will allow you to have the best opportunity of having the optimum solution to your problem. Now, once you've got as many solutions as possible, you work through what are the consequences of each. How well does each one work? What are the unintended consequences of your solution? What overall would suit you as the best solution to your problem? So this is a process of deduction. You're taking each of your proposed solutions in turn and working through to see how they would have an impact on your present situation. And finally, you put the best solution into practice and see whether it works. And once you've got the answer to that, whether it works or whether it doesn't work, you've generated new knowledge and you're ready to go back into the cycle at the beginning again. So this is a cycle of thinking. Starts with confusion, an uneasy feeling that something isn't quite right with the way you're thinking about your situation. You clarify it to work out what's going wrong. You propose possible solutions. You work out the consequences of those solutions and choose the best. And then you put the best solution into practice and see if it works, and back you go again, knowing more than you did before. Dewey gives 3 examples in how we think of people who are thinking in this way. The first is a very common everyday occurrence. You're going about your everyday business and you're suddenly struck by the thought that something isn't quite right. It's Monday morning and I'm sure there's something I ought to be doing this Monday morning and I'm not doing it. So you start with an uneasy feeling that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, something is not working the way it should be, and you don't feel quite comfortable in yourself. So the first thing to do is to clarify what is it that you think you should have been doing. Go to your diary, go through your text messages, go through your WhatsApp groups, find messages from friends, see whether you've committed to being somewhere today, doing something today that you're not doing. And you might well discover that you're in the north part of the city and you've got an appointment, you've promised to meet someone in the south part of the city in half an hour's time. So we're now very clear what the problem is. The problem is we are in the wrong place at the wrong time. We have half an hour to get to an appointment, and we've made a commitment that we're not at the moment squaring up to meet. So once we're clear about exactly what the issue is, we can propose possible solutions. We can propose ways of getting across town in order to meet our friend in half an hour. We can think about a bus, a bicycle, a car, a taxi, all possible ways of getting to where we are supposed to be in half an hour. And we can look at those different modes of transport and brainstorm as many possible ways of solving this problem as we can. And then for each of those solutions, we'll work out the consequences. If I take a bus, the bus will take me 50 minutes to get there, so I'll arrive 20 minutes late. I take a taxi, the taxi will take me 30 minutes to get there, I'll be on time, but it will cost me a lot of money, if it's in London, to take a taxi to get to the south part of the city. That each of the possible solutions will work out the consequences. When we have got the best one, the optimum solution for our purposes, we can put it into practice. I'll take a taxi, I'll get on the subway, and I'll take the journey, and I'll see whether I get there on time, whether my friend is still there when I get there, and I'll know more about the next time I go into this cycle about how to deal with these situations. Let me stress again, that step between step 3 and step 4, do not rush it. Savour the possibilities of solving the problem. Because we, each of us, have predispositions to favour certain solutions over others. When I put this case to my students, I think every one of them says, why don't you just phone your friend up and say you're going to be 20 minutes late, or would they prefer to reschedule another day? Because they've grown up with mobile telephones and I haven't. So it doesn't occur to me, if I think that if you make an appointment to meet someone, you have to be there. If you have mobile phones, you don't have to be so inflexible. You can have other solutions that would not have occurred to me. So it's that step from stage 3 to stage 4 that signifies the major difference between bad thinking and good thinking. The more possible solutions you look at, the more likely you are to have a good outcome. A second example he gives is of somebody who's travelling on a ferry, and they look up on the ferry, there's the captain's bridge high overhead, and somewhere about halfway down the boat there's a pole sticking out with a wooden ball on it, a wooden pole with a ball on the end. And he says, this is just the confusion is simple curiosity, what's that thing for? What is that for? And so you start clarifying the solution. Why would somebody, that's clearly, purposefully, they've put this stick with a ball on the end up at the top end of the ferry, what's it there for? And can we think of the purpose for that object? And so we propose as many possible solutions. Is it a flagpole? Is it a radio mast? Is it some kind of guide for aligning with the jetty? Is it some sort of signal? So we've got as many consequences, as many possible solutions as we can think of, and we then start thinking about, if it's a radio mast, is it in the place where I would expect it? If it's a flagpole, does it have the strings and pulleys that I would expect to be on a flagpole to hoist the flag up? If it's an alignment, if it's a gadget to align with the jetty, is it in the line of sight between the captain and the jetty? Each of these questions will have consequences for how we think about it, and when we've got the best solution that we believe, We can't do anything about it. I suppose we could go and ask a sailor on the ferry, what's that thing do? But apart from that, there's not really any way in which we could implement that solution to see whether it works. But we might go away satisfied in our own minds that we've come to a proper answer to the question of what is that thing for? And the third example that Dewey gives is of somebody who's doing washing up. They're washing up in soapy water and they're washing tumblers, glasses, and they're swishing them in the hot water, taking them out of the hot water, putting them on a flat, wet surface, and when they put the tumbler down on the flat surface, they start getting bubbles blowing around the lip of the glass. And they start saying to themselves, well, why is that glass blowing bubbles around the edge? And there are possible solutions you might want to think about. It's got something to do with the amount of soap in the solution. It's something to do with the air trapped inside the glass is being heated up by the glass. The air is expanding and it's blowing the bubbles. It's something to do with the flat surface. Possible solutions might come to you, and then you can definitely think about experiments. If you think it's the cold air in the glass is getting heated up, well, let's take it out of the water, wave it around a bit to make sure that it's full of cold air, and then put it down and see if it blows more bubbles. Or we could try cooling the glass down before putting it down on the surface to see whether it's the heat of the glass. We can do experiments to work out which of those solutions actually explains things best, and we go back into our next cycle with new knowledge about what's happening when we're doing the washing up and the bubbles form next to the glass. So this is Dewey's scheme of how we think: confusion, clarify, propose possible solutions, compare the different solutions in terms of whether they're likely to work or not, and then put the best one into practice and come back knowing more in the next cycle. This is a cyclical process of thinking, and not only does Dewey tell us that it's how we think, he tells us where the major mistake is likely to happen. The major mistake is to jump to conclusions too quickly at stage number 3. He thinks that if you're driven at that point by following impulses and following hunches, you're becoming a slave to lazy thinking. If you're going to be free as a person, you need to be free at that point to evaluate possibilities, to weigh up your choices. That freedom is intellectual freedom. So that's the content that Dewey has given us in his book. And now I'm going to offer you an evaluation. It's my turn to say what I've got to say about Dewey's book. Up until now, I've tried as fully as possible to explain what Dewey said, not colouring this with any thoughts of my own. I've tried to give you a pure description of the content. But now what I'm going to say, this is my evaluation. Now my evaluation is not going to be, it's good, isn't it? Or it's bad, isn't it? I'm not going to offer you that kind of evaluation, because Dewey's one of the major philosophical thinkers of the 20th century. I am not going to be offering you a simple evaluation in terms of good or bad, 5 stars or 1 star. What I'm going to do is to give you my sense of where he fits into the traditions that we use in education today. And importantly, look, it's a cycle of thinking that takes you back in the beginning. This is the basis of all of the experiential learning cycles that have become so popular in the late 20th century. Kolb's learning cycle, any cycle that is based on plan, do, review, and then go back and start again. those are drawn upon Dewey. Dewey's influence is huge and not always acknowledged. So that's the first thing I want to say about him. But perhaps more importantly, look, it's how we think, and it's all thinking he's described. He's not said there's scientific thinking and there's common sense thinking. No, the common sense thinking, the thinking about I've messed up my diary, how do I get across town, has exactly the same structure as the scientific thinking of me trying to work out about hot gases and water blowing bubbles when I put a cup down on the surface. For Dewey, thought is one activity. All scientific, quasi-scientific, common sense thinking has the same structure. And also importantly, he doesn't distinguish between the way adults think and children think. Children think in exactly the same processes as adults think, they just don't have as much knowledge in the first place. So their ability to work out proposed solutions and work out the consequences of those solutions is less than for an adult who's had more experience. Now that's not common in educational thinking. Piaget says children think differently from adults and they go through various stages in their thinking. The concrete, operational, the abstract, various stages in their thinking that are quite distinct. Similarly, Montessori says that children under the age of 7 think quite differently from children over the age of 7. Many prominent educationists think that children think differently and therefore children should be treated differently than adults. Dewey clearly does not. Thinking is thinking. So Dewey is unusual, and this is my evaluation, he's unusual in not classifying different kinds of thinking and different kinds of thinkers. And to me that's important. I think that is an important lesson to take away from Dewey. There are other thinkers who agree with him. I mean, most obvious for me is Vygotsky. Vygotsky also talks about children and adults as learners in the same way. What they're doing is, through the process of experience, building their mental capacity, building the tools that they have in their mind to make them think better, to achieve those higher functions. I think that Vygotsky and Dewey are very much on the same page when they're talking about this. So that's the end of the book review. You've had context, why Dewey wrote the book, content, what he had to say, evaluation, where it fits in with the overall pattern of educational thinking as we know it today. Now, one question will be remaining that you'll want to know the answer to is, why have I bothered to go through the question of writing a book review? Who writes book reviews? Well, what I'm saying to you now is you should write book reviews. You should be thinking about writing book reviews. Book reviews are normally written, I accept that book reviews are normally written for new books, not for books that are 110 years old. But if you see a book that you are intrigued by its title, that you think it would be important for you to read, it will address certain questions that you want answered, why don't you write to the editor of a journal, or if you can find the name of the review editor of the journal, write to the review editor of the journal and volunteer to review the book for them. If they say no, no harm is done. If they say yes, they will arrange for the publisher to give you the book for nothing. So there's the first bonus of writing a book review. Publishers love to see their books reviewed, and they'll give the book to a future reviewer free of charge. So that's the first benefit of writing a book review. You'll get the book for nothing. You'll also get a publication. I won't say it's an easy publication. It's not always easy to get the content, the context, the content and the evaluation all expressed clearly in the 600 words or 1,000 words that the journal allows you for a book review. That's where the art is in writing a book review. Let me just deal with one possible objection that you may have. If you're anything like my students, you'll say, producing an evaluation of a book on educational research, that's a job for professors. It's a job for people who understand and know the field very well. And I want to say to you, it isn't. I want to say to you that you, postgraduate educational researchers, or people interested in education for its own sake, are the target audience of books on educational research. When an author goes to a publisher and makes a pitch that they want to write a book, they have to fill in a questionnaire, and in that questionnaire they have to say who's going to want to read your book, who is your target audience. And I promise you that in almost every case they will have said, this book, the target audience for this book is educational researchers, postgraduate educational researchers. And if they're very ambitious, they will have said, and perhaps there's also an audience among adults who are interested in education. Parents, teachers, they may also want to read my book. So if you're watching this video, you are the target audience of books on educational research. You're not just the target audience, you're the bullseye of the target audience of a book on educational research. So if you're not entitled to make an evaluation of whether the book is clear, whether it's communicating its message, nobody is better qualified than you to make that judgment. So don't put this off. Don't say, I can't form a judgment until I'm a professor. Do it now. Start forming your opinions of what you're reading and be clear about what your opinions are of what you're reading. That's crucial to your development as an early career researcher. But I want to say more than that. I want to say that this process of reading for understanding what an author is doing, understanding and trying sympathetically to understand what the author is saying, and evaluating and offering your own insights into what is being said, this is what you should be doing whenever you read anything. You should be asking, why did this author write this paper? Why did they write this book? What is it that they wanted to say? What is it that they've experienced? The problem that they're trying to address, what is it that they're bringing to this? And then what do they say? And do they say it clearly? Do they say it well? Do they make an original contribution to the field? Or are they simply repeating what other people have already said? Writing a book review is a useful metaphor for doing educational research and reading the educational literature. So doing a book review is a valuable way of developing and exercising those faculties that you will need as an early career researcher. So let me simply put that to you, whether you get your book reviews published or not. It's an excellent exercise for you to sharpen your way of thinking and to develop your own expertise in the field. And so I'm going to commend to you that you go away and try writing book reviews, and if they get published, so much the better.